I give a fuck? Why do I give a fuck? Why do I try so hard? Why do I care so much?
Welcome to Why Do I Give a Fuck? A cross-cultural conversation between myself, Diane Tate,
and Johanna Thompson. In these times of great struggle and possible shift, we ask ourselves,
why do we give a fuck about any of it? How does the lens we see the world through impact what we see?
And what do we do about it? So it's good to see you, my friend. So much has been going on with you
Good to
and
see you.
doing reflections of family and all of that kind of stuff. So I'm glad because it really helps us to think about what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, before we get started, I want to say shout out to my little sis. It's her 51st birthday today. So happy birthday, Cece.
Half
Um,
a century.
yeah, yeah,
We love that.
yeah. She wears it well. Yeah, I mean, there are most people that are going to be listening to this wondering, why is it taking you this long to talk about it? Because it's been a couple of weeks of developing story, but of course
Mm,
I would like to start, or at least what I'm giving a fuck about right now
yeah.
is the fallout after the assassination of a particular conservative podcast host slash Turning Point USA founder. I'm gonna avoid saying his name because that's been a thing for people getting fired because they are talking about him and talking about his killing and his murder. And so, we don't have to say his name. I think everybody that's listening probably knows who we're talking about. So did
But
you?
is it actually speaking his name? I feel like we should be able to say it, but because free speech is a thing
Yeah, but
that
free
used to be
speech is
very
not a
important.
thing
I
anymore, which
know
is what we're going to talk
it
about.
used it used to be a thing in the United States.
Used to
One of
be a
like
thing.
the founding, how do we say, cornerstones, speaking about of like the bedrock of like what US culture is. And
Yeah,
it's free speech, is people being able to have their and be in their autonomy. And now we're seeing the level of erosion that happens when you are in opposition to Project 2025 and the plans that they have set forth
right.
for the way that they're rebuilding the United States right now,
Yeah, yeah,
especially in this time. So
yeah.
we are talking about a horrible assassination, a very visible assassination. We're
Hmm.
seeing a different type of, public lynching, but
Yes,
this was just a shootout, but I'm going to equate it to a public lynching
right.
and a different demographic of people and on a college university
Yes.
where there's a lot of young and impressionable people. So one of the first things that for me, when you called me and told me that, or you sent me a text and told me that this had happened, and then so I did start going on different mediums to find out. And first of all, I was absolutely blown away with the
Mhm.
coverage and footage like of the actual shot
Yes.
and the actual like I'm so unused to our media in the United States showing that vivid
Mm.
of violence and replaying it over and over and over and over and over again. And so that made me think like I always know with our politics, with our media, with the narratives that we put out, that it's intentional. It's an intentional storytelling and story creating. And to have seen that level of violence, that is not typical of what we would see on our normal media, a social, well, media channel. Social media, you can't really monitor that people are going to put up what it is that they capture until they start taking it down.
Right.
But I was just really, really shocked to see that level of violence, to see that little of violence with that age demographic of population of students and professors and teachers on a university, and that it was repeated. My first thoughts is like, oh gosh, they really are getting us ready for this race war. They really, really are.
Yeah. It's interesting. I did watch the video and I was aware of how desensitized I've become after 700 plus days of watching people being bombed and children being beheaded and shot and in Palestine, I'm speaking to specifically. And
Mm,
that when I watched it, I knew what I was watching. I knew it wasn't fake.
Hmm.
And um, I don't know. It was, I was very aware of what didn't impact me watching the video,
Mm.
because I have been watching what's been happening in Gaza for almost 2 years. So that was kind of an awareness to me about my own level of desensitization. And of course, we don't need to say it, but we're going to say it. The murder of anyone is not okay. It just is not.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I know I'm time stamping our episode today, but yesterday was the International Day of Peace, and I didn't even spend any time observing it. Did not even spend, because it's like, because I just don't even.
This is
I'm like,
because
it's so
you don't
far
feel like we
removed.
authentically are holding in honoring
Anywhere
and
close
representing
to it.
international peace. We're not.
Not
And
anywhere
definitely
close.
not as people from the United States. We're
Not
not.
anywhere close to it. And the fact that the day that this shooting happened, that this assassination happened, the same day there was another school shooting in Colorado where 3 students were shot in Evergreen, Colorado, and the gunman was killed. And you heard nothing about it
About that.
in our mainstream media. Nobody was talking about it. It reminds me of, yeah, it reminds me of the day that Princess Diana died. It was the same day that
Hmm.
Mother Teresa died, and you didn't hear a thing about Mother Teresa, even though she was a Nazi. But that's another day, another show. Um,
Mm.
so
So,
so yeah, it just, yeah. And so the fallout, the last couple of weeks since this happened, of course, this happened September 10th, which was the day before the anniversary of 9/11 here in the States, and the weaponization of this assassination has been so obvious to watch within
mhm.
the media
Let's talk about
space.
it and name it. Let's talk about and name what
Yeah,
this
has been
weaponization
so
is.
obvious. And to the point where, and here I'm going to wade into conspiracy theories. This is my opinion. I'm not carrying the opinion of anyone else. But I'm sorry, I don't think a 22-year-old kid has had the training to do a shot like that, only one to the jugular from 200 yards plus, in an old antiquated rifle, is what they're saying he used, that is so old it doesn't even have serial numbers on it anymore. And so I'm sorry, it's giving Harvey Oswald. So the day before 9/11, it's not surprising the weaponization of his assassination in terms of what people are saying in the public sphere about it and being
What are
fine.
they saying? I'm curious of what your algorithm is saying. And like, because with my folks, there's a lot of mixed feelings because he was like, a lot of folks are talking about his race baiting, his super white Christendom, his, you
Mhm,
know, the heteropatriarchy that he held so firmly,
mhm,
his inability to be expansive in his thought or in consideration of the diversity of human beings. Or let me say it in a different way. Let me say it in a more understanding way. His theories and experience and understanding of a diversity of people were limited, is the
mhm.
way that I want to say that in a very nice way, and or harmful, right? A number of the things
Very
that he was saying,
harmful.
because I didn't know anything about this man, honest to God, I really wasn't following him, paying attention to what he was talking about. He's not speaking to my demographic of people,
Mm,
so I didn't know what was coming out of his mouth,
yeah.
but I did know that there was this character that was going around and that was speaking into very divisive concepts, inconsiderate of how the impact on the people that he was speaking into, that he was speaking for and about, and
Mm,
not allowing them a platform to speak for and about themselves. And so all of that speaks into the harm of the way that we socialize ourselves in the US that continues this negative kind of racial tension that we
mhm,
have that occurs, so that when somebody like this does get assassinated in the way that he was assassinated, you have this conversation, or I've heard this conversation of, well, this person was bringing calling in a whole lot of hate,
yeah.
and and do we want to allow that level of hate to continue to flourish, to grow, and to create a wave? The thing is that when you martyr a person like that, and there is a large demographic of humans that are following them, then their martyrdom has a larger waving effect of now you have so many more people that are pouring into funds to pouring into like to continue the legacy of the messaging that this
Oh
person
yeah.
was talking
Oh
about.
yeah.
And so that's what we get to exist in the United States right now.
And that's why I'm again not necessarily a person who is given to conspiracy theories, but that's why I am leaning into this a little bit more because of the timing of everything,
Hmm.
and the repercussions and the weaponization that has been so obvious in the following days after the assassination. Is it just feels too neatly wrapped up with a bow in terms of, like you said, once you martyr somebody like this, the amplification of their original message is, prolific. I mean, you can see it happening, and the people that are being fired, and I have my beef with Jimmy Kimmel. I'm not a fan anyway because he did some blackface stuff. He did, he's
Hmm.
problematic in and of himself. But the fact that all he did was suggest that that the shooter was MAGA, and that got him fired. There's a long history of Trump not liking Jimmy Kimmel's show and the things that he said. And so to me, this felt like just the perfect excuse to get rid of him. The
Hmm.
only Black woman that worked for the Washington Post, Karen Atia, has also been fired. And all she did was do a social post essentially to the effect of, she was talking about the statement that the guy that got assassinated made regarding several prominent Black women, including First Lady Michelle Obama, that they did not have the brain processing power to be taken seriously. Joy Reid was also in that
Mm.
quote.
Joy.
He just spoke to that on social
Hmm.
media, this journalist, after his assassination, and she got fired. And she was the only Black woman that still worked at the Washington Post as a journalist. So to me, it's like when you look at the breadcrumbs of what happens and the weaponization that happens after the assassination, and you start putting those pieces together, it starts to make sense that maybe this was done intentionally by the people who are now using the ability to weaponize what happened to take out the people that they don't want to hear from anymore. And then like you mentioned, the money that's been pouring into the organization that he founded back in 2012. And then to that point, also, not only has that organization's coffers just exploded with donations since he was assassinated, but as of this was written September 17th, so this was a few days ago, the U.S. Department of Education, I'm just going to read the first paragraph. The U.S. Department of Education, alongside the America First Policy Institute, Turning Point USA, which was his organization, Hillsdale College, and more than 40 leading national and state based organizations, today announced the launch of the America 250 Civics Education Coalition. This landmark initiative is dedicated to renewing patriotism, strengthening civic knowledge, and advancing a shared understanding of America's founding principles in schools across the nation. So he's killed on the 10th. We observe the commemoration of September 11th and all of the patriotism yahoo that brings up anyway on any given year. And then we start to see voices being silenced that work in the public sphere that are speaking against the person that was killed, but also speaking against, and they weren't even speaking against the person that was killed. They didn't say anything about the person that was killed, except just talking about what he actually said, what can be seen in print and in video, because he did not mince his words. But now we see the US Department of Education having, so it's like his assassination gave permission for all of this stuff to happen, right? So, and I know I'm speaking to the choir, but I'm just laying this out for anybody who hasn't really thought about this or hasn't really thought about this timeline. It's not it would not surprise me if he was martyred by his own people, if you might think that way, to facilitate this, cascade of events to happen afterwards. And this isn't the first time that that's happened. they're coming, the investigative bodies are now coming out because the everything that was said right after it happened was it was the left, it was the left, it was the left. This kid was MAGA. His parents were MAGA. They were they were not of the left. And
What
so
was he MAGA? Because I saw something, I believe my young people sent it to me, where the person who is being accused of doing
mhm.
the assassination was texting someone. Did you see
The
that?
text I did see, I don't believe them, but I did see the text, and he was a roommate or a former and maybe current relationship love interest who identifies as trans. So I do know that he had that affiliation to, and which again, I don't know that I trust the text. I was reading them and I was like, I don't know any 22-year-old that talks like this. And so I've gotten so suspicious of anything that the propaganda machine puts out. I wouldn't be
Yeah.
surprised if the texts were false. I wouldn't even be surprised if his affiliation or his connection to a transhuman is false, because that plays into their narrative of, oh, it's the left because he had a trans, girlfriend or boyfriend or significant
But
other.
trans people can also be right.
Right,
I
right.
just
I
want
mean,
people to
you know,
understand that. Like we're talking about
right.
political
It's not as
ideologies, and then we're
often,
also
but
talking about self-identity, you know?
yeah, it's not as often.
Hmm.
But what's her name? Who's the one that was the more prominent trans human that identifies as MAGA? God, their name is escaping me now.
Oh, I wouldn't know.
Connected
Hmm.
with Kardashians. I can't think of her name. Anyway, um,
Oh, Caitlyn Jenner?
yes, Caitlyn Jenner. She's a
Oh, okay.
huge MAGA
Okay.
supporter. Yeah. So you're right. Absolutely, they can be trimmed. But the narrative. So when you think about the story that's being told, when you automatically want to associate him with being the left because they want to demonize the left as being this person
Mhm.
that assassinated this other person. It's just
But it
too.
wasn't the left, right? So
It wasn't.
even though that is what that I remember that there was somebody, I think one of the police chief or agents, he was just like, I prayed for 30 minutes hoping and hoping that it wasn't one of us.
Yeah. Well,
Right? And that
I mean, black people have been saying that for years, haven't you? I mean, it's like every time something
literally
major
in
happens,
that
it's like, oh
statement,
shit, don't be my people,
absolutely.
don't be my
Please don't
people.
be my people. But literally in that statement, it helps to like recognize like how volatile it was and how like the associations that how the knowledge that everyone has about the associations that this assassination
Yeah,
and the implications of this assassination,
right,
what they're going to be. If you're US born, if you're US cultured, and you're paying any attention to the socio-political climate right now,
right.
that assassination and the public way that it was displayed
Hmm.
is a critical turning point to what is the intention of how they're trying to rebuild the United States. In the same way that us watching George Floyd in such a very violent and visible way was a turning point in the way that our United States socialization is impacted. And you
Speaking of George Floyd, that's another
mhm,
piece of the
I
weaponization.
mean, mhm.
Trump signed an executive order, and well, no, he didn't sign an executive order. The Congress actually voted on this and voted in affirmative. And look up if you've got Democratic Congress people in your state, look up whether or not they voted for this because a lot of them did, to designate October 19th, yes, October 19th as the person that was assassinated's day, which is also George Floyd's birthday. It's the day after, I believe it's the day
Oh, that's
after,
harmful in all
it's
so many
the
ways.
day after Indigenous Peoples Day. Oh no, it's the 14th, October 14th, because it's the day after Indigenous Peoples Day and it's George Floyd's birthday. And they have now claimed that
Mhm.
as a federal holiday
So
in,
immediately.
in honor of the assassinated one. So yeah, all of these things, it's like you're packaging this beautiful present with the most glorious bow because it all just comes together so well. So in the next time our electeds try to tell us that they can't possibly get a federal holiday for anything because it just takes forever to get them voted on.
But we all know that these people do what they want to do. We're seeing the demonstration. We're able to observe that completely with the way that our government is not existing with the level of democracy that most people in the United States have experienced in their privilege.
Yeah, not even close.
It's
Not,
a lawless country at this point in time.
and the media, I mean, the media has always been complicit, but they are so far up the administration's ass right now in terms of, the demonstrations that are happening in the streets of DC because of the weaponization of the National Guard. None of that's being covered. Nobody is hearing about what's happening. He signed an
Hmm.
executive order to move the National Guard into Memphis. So
Hmm.
Memphis is going to be the next city targeted, and Chicago is supposed to be following. Nobody's paying.
Baltimore is another one that they have plans for.
Yes, I have heard whispers about Baltimore. I've also heard that they're running into roadblocks with Baltimore, which is great. Whatever that roadblock is, more power to it. The fact that the reports recently have been, and I know I'm all over the place, but the concentration camp that they erected in Florida,
Hmm.
otherwise known as Alligator Alcatraz, that 2/3 of the detainees are gone. They're missing. Nobody knows where they are. There are no records. There's no idea of any, and nobody's talking about it, So even though the media has been complicit for, decades, generations, whatever, however long you want to apply to it, it's gotten even deeper and even worse. And so for, they what did they finally he designated Antifa as a terrorist organization. So now anybody that wants to that associate, first of all, Antifa is not even a thing. It's not even an organized group. There is no.
No, it's just a nomer for anarchists that
It means
people supposed to
anti-fascist.
classify.
That's what Antifa
Yes,
stands for, anti-fascist. So you're going
hmm,
to designate an organization, first of all, that doesn't exist, to as a terrorist organization when it stands for
for
anti-fascist.
something being anti-fascism. Yeah, it, it's
I'm
it's
laughing, but
amazing.
it's not a laugh.
No, but it's also amazing to sit in the like to be alive in this moment, seeing these things occurring
Yeah.
in the United States, which is supposed to be the model for the supposed democracy that we've never really been able to achieve in any country at all anyway, but at least we had a really strong model of what it could look like.
Hmm.
And in this moment, for those who are not familiar with our political structures, most of the rhetoric that comes out of the right, the Republican Party, is to remove big government from people's lives, to allow people to live in their kind of individual autonomy. And as we have this entire Republican administration coming in, government is all over the place. So a whole big thing about Jimmy Kimmel getting fired, a big part of it was a pressure on Disney that they wouldn't get some of the government benefits if they continue to have this person employed. So that's government
Yeah,
that's putting
because
the pressure. It's not just like
yeah,
Trump administration and Trump being mad about it, but it's just like all of the folks that are participating in our administration, which is why it's so important for us to be voting not just in the presidential elections, but all of the folks that are participating in our administration right now are supporting this level of government injection into corporations, people, education in a way that the Republican and the right party used to say that they did not want government to be involved in people's lives. So there's been times in history where we've seen this before
mhm,
happen where, there's a what we understand as the Democratic and the left party was initially the Republican Party against the government. And then all of that stuff got switched around. And we're seeing that same type of shift happening again. And that is all for the purpose of creating hierarchies and systems of power that privilege one group of people over the other. It's the same blueprint that has happened throughout the course of history in the United States. I'm just going to keep repeating it because I want whomever comes on to hear our podcast to be in the thought about this is none of what is new has not happened before in the
right,
history of the United States.
right.
And what is happening now, again, because the demographic population of the United States is shifting so significantly. And it's not about the migrant population that's coming in, it's about the lack of power that white identified humans are holding now because the demographic shift. And those are the things that we need to be thinking about. How do we how do we create environments where white identified folks don't feel threatened of losing whatever perceived power it is that they hold? And it's not just perceived power, because I don't want to act like the power is not true, but I'm curious about, when I say perceived power, what it is that you think that you're actually losing with us existing in the way that we have been existing, with all of the advances, with all of the inclusion, with all of the diversity, with all of the expanding of our knowledge. What is it that's actually being lost that you want to have power and control over, other than these narratives that tell the story that, this is something that I grew up with in my household, a colloquialism, white is right. Eh,
Mm,
we would always, it was a joke, like, oh yeah, white is right. Like, we're just going to do this thing because white people said that we're supposed to do it, and white is right because it just makes sense. And it doesn't make sense unless you're talking about the privilege and the glory of like what we were talking about before we even started recording this with this podcast. And we're looking at the history of folks that have had an experience and enjoy wealth in the United States and live a specific and certain kind of way. But that has only ever been accessible to less than 10% of the
right,
population here.
right, right. You know, the first thing that comes to mind, two things that come to mind. One is that we've always, and I've heard this said before, this is not an original thought to me, that whiteness believes that we are going to be treated the same way we have treated others for hundreds of years. And that
Mm,
is embedded in, and I don't even know if it's a conscious thought. Like, I don't even know if you asked random white people, do you believe that if black people got more power over you, that they would just, put you all on concentration camps and, and they would all be like, no, so I don't even
yeah,
think it's conscious. I think it's subconscious. I was
subconscious.
listening to someone speaking earlier today that was talking about um, epigenetic trauma, and that trauma
Mm,
that's embedded in your bones and in your
mm,
DNA from generations of trauma. And we've talked about this a little bit before,
yes,
and I think that we're taught that messaging is woven into the fabric of whiteness so indelibly over, because of the centuries that it's been in our consciousness, that I think that's one of our biggest fears, and again, not conscious, but fear of retribution, I guess, which is because that's how we function, right? We are always
but
taking.
nobody else. I just started laughing because I'm just thinking nobody else act like white people.
I know, but that's the thing. Because our lens is so clouded, and I'm even going to use this metaphor because you know me, I like to talk in pictures. Just imagine that my glasses are like milk glass, right? And they're so
Yeah,
clouded, and it's not lost on me that that's white. They're so clouded that I cannot see what's right in front of me, and I have no clue. And I'm please understand, I'm not taking culpability away from any of us, but there's this embedded nature of the story that we just don't see it. We don't get it. And I've always said that I think
yeah,
whiteness is like white supremacy is like a three-legged stool. And if you take one of the legs is that whiteness doesn't see itself in the
it's
bullshit
health.
we do. And
Hmm.
again, it's not to take our culpability, it's not to make us victims, but it is, to me, one of the most insidious parts about whiteness and about white supremacy, that we can't see it. So like when I have conversations with other white people about this stuff, I have to spend so much time just talking about the basic fundamentals to say, have you ever noticed this? Have you ever seen that? Have you ever noticed this? How do you feel when this comes up? Had a conversation with
Mm,
someone not long ago that you and I both know. How do you feel when this comes up? He didn't like how he felt.
hmm.
But it's like I wish that to me that's the biggest thing to unpack in whiteness, and that's like where I spend most of my time when I talk to other white people about
Hmm.
this stuff, because if we can't unpack that, we're not going to be able to see past that milk glass that we've got in our glasses. We're just not. And we don't get that liberation for all is liberation for others is liberation for all, that it's liberation for us too. And this is another, we could have another podcast about this, but the difference between the word peace as we just
Mm-hmm.
celebrated the International Day of Peace yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And it different from liberations. I heard somebody say that peace is a white word and that liberation
True.
is where it's really at. And you and I have had these conversations because we met through
Mm.
our organization that was very focused on peace. And I really struggled with all of that because it's like peace looks different for everybody. It's not, it's just such a hard word. It's liberation, that's the word for me that's even more powerful and more impactful than peace. So
Well, let's
I
talk
don't
about
know.
the difference of peace and liberation the next time we come together, because I think that
Yeah,
that would be a really good and important conversation to have in the context of thinking about assassination, thinking about free speech being eroded, thinking about a democracy being eroded, thinking about the U.S. existing in kind of like a very lawless state because it's just really being run in a fascist oligarchic kind of government um,
openly now.
situation right now.
Always been
Yeah, very
openly now.
clearly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one
And
more thing to the free speech
no,
thing,
okay.
and then we'll wrap up. So we've talked a little bit about our listeners and who's been listening to us of late. And I gave a shout out to Texas a
So,
few episodes ago. Well,
yeah.
shout out to Virginia,
All right, Virginia in the
but
house.
not necessarily in the best way. So we had 2 days in these past five
Hmm.
where we had over 60 downloads of our podcast from the state of Virginia. And I just want to invite people to
Hey,
think
Virginia.
about what organizations are based in Virginia.
Hmm.
Largely, some of those that have like three-letter names or
Hmm.
three-letter initials. And so, shout out to you guys if you're listening. I hope that you're learning something from listening to our podcast. But yeah, Virginia's been super active lately. So shout out to those three-letter agencies.
Okay. I'm sitting here like maybe I'm thinking I know what you're talking about, but maybe I don't.
Mm. Well, just think
Maybe
about
I
the
don't.
proximity of Virginia to our national capital and think about the
Hmm.
three-letter agencies that tend to exist in Virginia because there's not necessarily room for them in DC. And then think about 2 days of over 60 downloads of which has never happened before. And, just put all those pieces together. I'll just leave those breadcrumbs and say,
So like,
hey,
are we being red?
Virginia.
Are we being red baited right now? Like possibly like checked in to
Yeah,
see why we talk about?
I think so. I think so. I don't have any evidence to support that.
Well, what's the
I think
name
so.
of the podcast?
Why do I give a fuck? I don't give a fuck about that. So, anyway, thank you, my
Uh,
friend. Always a good
uh,
conversation.
yes, it
Let's
is.
all
Yes,
stay
it is.
safe out there,
It is.
and we will
All
talk
right.
at you next time.
Yes, peace and liberation.
Peace and liberation. Liberation first.
Why do I give a fuck? Why do
Thanks for
I
joining
give a
us.
fuck?
Until next time,
Why
as you
do I
move
try
throughout
so
your
hard?
day,
Why am I
continue to
so
ask yourself,
attached? Why do I give a
Why
fuck?
Do I Give a
Why
Fuck
do
is
I
produced
give
in
a fuck?
collaboration with Johanna and
Why
Diane.
do I try
Music
so
by
hard?
Norwegian
Why do I
musician
care so
Water.
much?
See you next time.
Why do